Hey guys, welcome to a very special episode of TFL Talk because today we are having a discussion about a very important new vehicle. Nathan, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the 2021 brand new, all new Jeep Grand Cherokee.
That's right, a hugely important model for Jeep, a hugely important model for America because Jeep sells a ton of these vehicles to families all across the US. This is a staple of the American SUV, and in this video, we're going to tell you everything you need to know about it, go in depth about the design, the interior, the powertrains, and just kind of nerd out about the Grand Cherokee. So that's coming up right now.
Congratulations, you have now tuned into TFL Talk, where we discuss everything automotive, whether it's cars or trucks. This is the one place where you can be sure to get independent and honest reviews. Let's get back to the show right now.
Nathan, it has been a long time since there's been a new Grand Cherokee.
That's right, it's been, well, about a decade.
Yeah, so the current one's called the WK2, and as you are going to mention here in a second, that one dates back so many years. It's actually related to the first WK, which was what, like the Daimler era?
That's right, the Chrysler Daimler era. So basically it's like a Mercedes platform. Now granted, not a lot of components from the old days, but there's still some. And it's been around forever, and it's one of the oldest platforms that the FCA is currently using.
Yeah, that's right. Now, this is where things get a little bit confusing because the Jeep we're talking about today is called the Grand Cherokee L, which we presume stands for long or large, but there's going to be a shorter one as well, right?
That is correct, but we don't know anything about that one yet. They haven't released any of the technical information about it. It's coming out later on, they did say that. But they're still building the old WK2, and that's being built at the Jefferson North plant, the old plant. This new one will be built at the new Mark plant in Detroit, Mack plant, not Mark, Mack plant and in Detroit. And that one, well, that one is an all-new platform. It is an all-new vehicle.
Yeah, it's very exciting for us Jeep people out there because the Grand Cherokee, you know, they sell so many of them every single year. It's such a versatile platform. Super curious to see how this new one will be in person, but unfortunately, because of the craziness in the world, we have to do this digitally. But hey, we're going to still go over everything you need to know. So it's kind of funky to me that they're doing the old one and the new one at the same time. But it's not really all that unusual, right, for FCA?
Not for FCA. If you think about it, right now, they're still, I believe they're still building the classic Ram 1500, even though they're selling, and this has been for a while, they're selling the all-new Ram 1500. And there's a demand for it. If there wasn't a demand, they wouldn't do it. And it's also a really good way to keep and finish off a lot of stampings and whatnot, and then dial it back to redoing the entire plant and building something else there. So that's, we assume, now they haven't announced this, but we're assuming that, at least for the foreseeable future, the smaller WK2 model, the two-row, 5-passenger Jeep Grand Cherokee, will be built for a little while, and we're assuming that once they come out with the smaller wheelbase version of the new model, that one will go away. That's what we're assuming.
So this let me get started over there. This WL, this long wheelbase one, is a big old vehicle, but believe it or not, it still isn't going to be the biggest in the Jeep lineup because we saw the concept a little while back of the Grand Wagoneer.
Right.
And this does share some styling cues. That one was a concept. This one is, heading for production. This is a real thing, yeah. But that's supposed to be even bigger and potentially six figures, at least compared to this new Grand Cherokee. So let's start out by kind of talking about some of the design and some of the style. Nathan, what do you think of this new model?
It definitely looks like a Jeep product. It's a little underwhelming to me in terms of its styling. I thought they'd do something a little bit more dramatic, but it makes sense at the same time because they don't want to, be polarizing. They want to bring people in and say, yeah, okay, that looks a lot like the Jeep Grand Cherokee. However, when you see this long model from its profile, you realize how ridiculous it is in terms of length compared to a regular Grand Cherokee. Its overall length is 204.9 inches. Now, to put that into perspective, the Tahoe, the brand new Tahoe, which we just recently tested, is 211 inches long, and the regular Ford Expedition is 210 inches long. So this isn't as long as those, but it's still very, very long. Another vehicle to think about, Tommy, is the current Durango, which is really close in length to this vehicle. In fact, it's surprisingly close. They're within just a minor, couple, like an inch of each other. That's how long. So it's a very long vehicle. And the reason why I mention this and why that might be an issue is because, hey, it's a Jeep. It should be able to go off-road. So I have the dimensions for approach, departure, and breakover angles and ground clearance, which we'll cover in just a sec. And some of those numbers are a little shocking.
Well, our friend over at Alex on Autos, Alex Stykes, he was running some of the numbers, and he discovered that this is basically the same size as the Mercedes GLS, the big 3-row SUV Mercedes, and the BMW X7. So we understand this is a podcast. You're probably not looking at this vehicle on the screen like you might be if you're watching on YouTube, but the overall design is much more squared off than the current Grand Cherokee, and it's I think a lot better in some ways. So the front end, yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I like how just bold the front end is. Very kind of, it's got this inverse raked grille, so the grille is raked kind of forward like an old school 70s BMW.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's got these squinty headlights. The headlights look much more narrow, and then it's got very square wheel arches, and there's a character line that continues. It's a flat line that continues from the front all the way down the side of the vehicle, and then the roof line has this kind of interesting chrome trim that dips down toward the back, so it gives it kind of this streamlined look. What do you think of it? Do you like it as much as the current one?
I think that it's a squared off, more modern look. I don't really think... once again, I find that the profile is a little shocking.
What do you mean by shocking?
It
is
just
it just
looks
too much?
so long. It really looks long to me. But from the front and the rear, I like it. I think it's a very handsome vehicle. And at the same time, we haven't seen all the versions of this vehicle. Now, there are 5 versions: the Standard, the Laredo, the Limited, the Overland, and the Summit. And most likely they'll add to that in the future. One thing FCA likes to do, and I'm pretty sure they'll do it when it becomes Stellantis, is they will probably add other trims and other special edition versions of this vehicle. However, as it stands, it's handsome from almost every angle, except for the profile in my book. But the main thing about this vehicle is the fact that it has a remarkably good-looking interior.
It does. It's got a super good-looking interior. Now, like you mentioned, of those trims at launch, we still haven't heard anything about an SRT.
Right.
We don't know anything about a Trailhawk or a Trackhawk. So we don't know anything about the off-road one or the street-going one. And we don't know anything about a plug-in hybrid yet. So we'll talk about engines in a second. But I think we need to dive right into the interior because that is the big selling point. What do you think of its design?
Absolutely stunning. I don't think any other vehicle in the class. If it's as good feeling as it is looking, it will be best in class. It looks phenomenal. One thing that FCA has managed to do with even their pickup trucks is they've built beautiful interiors that have very good feeling components. Say what you will about whatever reliability issues you think FCA has, but when it comes to their design, the physical design, the way things look, their interiors are just astonishing, and this one is just right up there. It might be one of the best looking interiors in any 3-row SUV I've ever seen.
It is a lot better than the current one, even like the Overland current one. I mean, I like the pleated leather. I really like the way they've incorporated the infotainment into the center stack. So some vehicles like the Ford Explorer, which is a big competitor for the Grand Cherokee, they have the infotainment, the center screen that just goes woof.
It looks like it was added on as an afterthought in the Ford.
It juts upwards. On the new Grand Cherokee, you can see here, it's very streamlined.
Yeah, it's much more integrated. Now, the Ford looks good in terms of that display is a really good display, but this one just is a better overall design, I think. Everything about this I just really, really like. It's hard to find fault in something that has what looks like high-quality leather, really good plastics, metals, and woods. So, that's where I stand with it. I think it's just beautiful.
I'm not sure about the steering wheel. I think the steering wheel is a little bit too, Chrysler luxury. I think they could have done a little bit more rugged with the overall design. But I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a vast improvement over the current one. So some things you'll notice right down the middle here, we have a rotary knob to select park, reverse, neutral, drive. That's pretty similar to other Jeep products.
Yeah, well, it has the 8-speed automatic. We'll talk about that transmission in just a bit when we talk about Powertrain. But basically, what they've been doing is there is some part sharing that's going on in order to keep some of the price down, I guess. And that thing is pretty much right out of all of their other part spins when it comes to rotary knobs. I'm not a huge fan of those, to be honest with you, but it looks like it works in this vehicle.
Yep, so rotary knob. Next to the rotary knob, you can see a couple of things. So it is available with air suspension. We'll talk about some of the specs there, but we have a height adjustment on the air suspension. To the left of the rotary knob, there's a toggle to change the drive mode. Several different drive modes ranging from sport modes to rock modes and snow modes.
Yeah.
And then other things to take note of, above the rotary knob you'll find the climate control, so areas for dual zone automatic climate control, more toggle switches again, and then heated ventilated seats, heated steering wheel. And then we've got the screen, which is directly above that. It is, based on some of the pictures, slanted kind of toward the front of the vehicle. I'll be curious to see how that works with glare, but yeah, I think that they just knocked it out of the park. It's much more premium, if not less kind of off-roady, if you know what I mean.
Right, and that's what I'm curious about, to see whether or not this type of design carries over from their base model all the way up to, you know, the Summit and the Overland. I mean, obviously we're looking at the higher end ones, so I'm curious to what those base models look like. I'm curious to what the volume sellers are going to look like. And later on in time, if they do build a more off-roady version of this, will that be a different interior? I think it might, but it's really difficult to say for sure because things are changing at FCA.
So being the L, this is the 3-row configuration, and there's a number of different seating arrangements. You can have 2, 3, 2, or you can have 2 with the captain's chairs in the second row if you want a little bit less seating capacity but more comfort for the second row passengers. Right. And then the 5-passenger one we think is the short one, which is not yet available. So that will be coming out later this year. All right, Nathan, let's kind of dive into some of the engines and some of the technical specs. What do we have under the hood?
So there's 2 different powertrains that you're going to be able to get right off the bat. And there's a lot of other ones that might come in the future but have not been officially announced. So the 2 that have been announced, 5.7 liter Hemi V8 and the 3.6 liter Pentastar V6. Big surprise there, right?
I was shocked actually that they didn't change the powertrain. So the current Jeep also uses the 3.6 and the 5.7. I thought we'd see some kind of forced induction right off the bat, like that 2 liter they use in other Jeeps. I thought maybe we'd see some hybridization off the bat, but horsepower and torque numbers, I have them written down here.
Yep, I do too.
Okay, go for it.
357 horsepower, 390 pound-feet of torque coming out of the 5.7 liter Hemi, and 290 horsepower and 257 pound-feet of torque coming out of the 3.6 liter Pentastar. Now, here's the thing about that. Those numbers are very similar to what are currently going on with these, in the vehicles that are being used. So, 8-speed automatic transmission. That 8-speed is the 8HP70 Auto, which is basically the same one that they're using in a lot of other vehicles. Once again, a lot of part sharing.
Yeah, it is interesting to me that the specs are almost identical to the current one. Towing capacity, 6,200 max for the V6, 7,200 pounds max for the V8. You know, a lot of capability, less than the Durango.
Right.
It's worth noting it is less than the Durango. But yeah, I mean, I really thought that they'd switch it up. Now, the V6, the 3.6, has been around since like 2011 or 2012. It's been around for, about 10 years now.
It's a solid engine that is considered very reliable, by the way, for those of you who are wondering.
Yeah, the Toyota people are going to hate that comment, but it's true.
It's true. The Pentastar is considered reliable.
Yeah, they last a long time, and the V8 has been around since longer than I've been alive, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you think about the 5.7 liter Hemi is the go-to engine for almost everything they have that's a truck. And it's a solid, reliable, beefy engine. And I say reliable with a caveat that, for some of you out there who have issues with the e-torque thing, that can't even talk about that right now, but it is a beefy engine. 357 horsepower is not bad. Almost 400 pound-feet of torque, not bad. Right up there with a lot of the other competitors. Right,
and I think that the Grand Cherokee is also going to be SRT-defied at some point.
Oh, they got to do that. They got to, come on. You got to throw a red-eye engine in there and go crazy.
Yeah, and that's not been confirmed, but I think
that
that's
has not been confirmed.
Fair prediction. So speaking of hybridization, though, Jeep did say there's a 4xe coming. 4xe is a term they use for their plug-in hybrids, like on the Wrangler. So
right.
That is going to be something to look forward to if you want a little bit more efficiency. But as it sits, V6 or V8. Now, it is a standard rear-wheel drive vehicle, but four-wheel drive, of course, is available.
Right. There's 2 different four-wheel drive systems that are going to be available. Code name MP3010 is basically like an all-wheel drive single, it doesn't have a two-speed transfer case, a single-speed transfer case. So basically, when wheels slip, it just fires up the front end because it is a rear-wheel drive vehicle to begin with. That is your standard system. And then you have the MP3022, which is with their two-speed transfer case, 2.72. It is basically what is currently being used on your current Jeep Grand Cherokee with their transfer case for off-roading. In general, there are beefier systems that are out there that Jeep does build. Whether or not those are going to happen is a question.
Right, so if you live in like a warm, sunny state, not looking for four-wheel drive, you can get in rear-wheel drive. As Nathan mentioned, there's the Quadra-Trac 1, which is a single-speed system. There's also the Quadra-Trac 2, which has the low range. That's going to be on the Overland and the Summit on launch. It's also part of the off-road group on the Overland. And that's going to have an electronic limited slip rear differential as well. The Quadra-Trac 1 also does not have hill descent control, and it does not have select terrain on the Laredo.
Right.
So that's going to be more of like just the driving around, bombing
Kind
around.
of an all-wheel drive system,
Yeah,
basically,
like
is the way I
the
look at
snow.
it.
Yeah, so that's good that they're still offering a low range, because in the Explorer, which has long been one of the chief competitors to this vehicle, the Explorer has gone away with the 4-low, and it's been like that for some time now.
An all-wheel drive vehicle, basically, with the Explorer. And the thing is that we don't know yet whether or not there's going to be a serious off-road version of this. And I think one of the reasons why I'm questioning it, whether or not it's going to happen, is because some of the dimensions on this vehicle are kind of head-scratchy when it comes to off-roading. You want to get into that now, or you want to wait?
No, go for it. Let's talk about the
so let's
angles.
talk about the approach. Now, for those of you who are listening and not watching, and if you don't know about approach, departure, and breakover angles, basically, the better the degree, the higher the degree of each one of them, the better it is off-road, but then the less aerodynamic the vehicle tends to be. As such, when I tell you that this, without the air suspension, has a 20.6 degree approach angle, that is akin to a lot of, like, almost a minivan. It's really, really low. Breakover angle without the air suspension, 18.2 degrees. Once again, that's not great for off-roading. And then finally, departure angle, once again, without air suspension, 20.5 degrees departure. And that's partially due to the fact this is a very long vehicle. So that's without air suspension. Those numbers are not great for off-roading. That is basically in the same market as a lot of crossovers that we've tested at Tommy's Bashed Off-Road. And I'm just throwing your name in there because...
Nope, that's fine.
That's it. But now, if you get the air suspension, suddenly everything improves. This is most likely based on their highest setting. Approach angle, 30.1 degrees. That's pretty good. Breakover angle, 22.6 degrees. That's okay. And maximum ground clearance when you get the air suspension is 10.9 inches. That's not too bad. Departure angle with the air suspension is 23.6 degrees. So it does improve significantly with the air suspension, but those numbers are still not as good as I would like for going off-road.
Well, so here's kind of the way I'm looking at it. If you get the standard steel spring car, it's worse in pretty much every dimension than the equivalent WK standard steel spring car. I mean, it has less ground clearance than the outgoing Grand Cherokee. But if you get the air suspension, the numbers become slightly better than the best of the current Grand Cherokee. So, for example, this new model with air suspension is up to 10.9 inches, like you mentioned, which is slightly higher than the current WK2. So basically, if you want to do any kind of off-roading whatsoever in this vehicle, it sounds like they're really pushing you to get a higher trim with the low range and the air suspension. And if you're not going to go off-road at all, they've lowered down the steel springs. They've made it much more street-worthy, which is fine for most people. But if it means that currently, without the Trailhawk, if you want to actually hit the dirt, you're going to pay a lot for a Grand Cherokee.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it looks like you're going to, if you want to do any actual off-roading with this vehicle, you've got to get the air suspension, or else you're going to get hung up.
Speaking of the air suspension, there are 5 modes on offer, various different heights. Jeeps have been doing this for a while now, but there's a normal mode, there's a park mode, an aero mode, and then 2 different off-road settings, and the air suspension has a range of 4.1 inches from top to bottom. So that's kind of how that works. All right, let's kind of talk about some of the technology offered in the new Grand Cherokee.
Yeah.
So the standard infotainment is the Uconnect 5 system. We just tried this on the new Pacifica.
Yeah.
And Nathan, I think, spent some time with that. It's the new updated system. What did you think of it?
I actually like the 4 better.
Did you really?
Yeah, it's strange. I think the 4 is a little easier to use than the 5. It's kind of, in my mind, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so the 4 was great. The 5 is a little bit more technical, and I also found that when I was activating, hitting the screen, that there was a delay sometimes trying to get from one thing to another. And also the swish, I like to call it the swish, where you're moving everything over from one screen to another by using your hand gesture and pulling across the screen. It wasn't as smooth as the old one. So I didn't love it, but at the same time, in terms of stereo system, in terms of connectivity, all that other stuff worked really well.
Yeah, so that was in the Pacifica, which is one of the first vehicles to debut the new Uconnect system.
Right.
I agree with you on a lot of what you said. I think the picture is a lot more crisp.
Yeah.
And the picture is a lot more clear than the previous generation Uconnect. Some of the usability isn't quite as apparent. You kind of got to dig around a little bit more for it. I think it's a pretty good system.
Yep.
And on this new model, the WL, you get a standard 8.4-inch screen and then an available 10.1-inch screen.
Yeah, the 10.1-inch screen, that is as big as I would want personally, but the regular one, 8.4 inches is pretty good.
Yeah, it is pretty good. And speaking of the gauges and the instrumentation, you can get it with good old-fashioned dials, but there's also an available 10.2, oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The 10.25-inch frameless digital gauge cluster is standard.
Oh.
Not available. So that is a misspeak on my part.
Okay.
That's kind of interesting. So they don't have any more physical dials in there. It's all on a screen.
Yep, so it's all going to be screen. Now, you know who one of the first companies to actually do that, make it standard?
Who?
Jaguar.
Really?
Which we know is super reliable when it comes to building these types of things. As far as I know, those screens have been okay, though.
So I'm not a production expert, but in my mind, it's much cheaper to stick a screen in there and code than actually have to produce and make bespoke dials for each car. What do you think of that?
I would say that if you're right about like only building one thing and spreading the joy throughout the entire lineup, as opposed to building 2 completely different components, especially for an all-new vehicle. If it were an older vehicle where you were introducing the screen, then you still build the dials and everything else because it's cheaper for lower-end models. But in this case, that's kind of cool because you get a standard, completely LCD front screen that you can, looks pretty damn sharp to me. So
speaking of the audio system, available is a 950-watt, 19-speaker Macintosh. Is that how you say it, or is it Macintosh?
I'm really bad at that, so I'm just going to say stereo system.
I'm pretty sure it's Macintosh because I think it's the same system that they used in the original Ford GT. If I remember right, that was also, I think Macintosh is how you pronounce it. But let me know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. So speaking of technology, Apple CarPlay.
Yep.
Android Auto.
Standard, I believe.
Yeah, Amazon Alexa. Standard blind spot monitoring, which you're going to need in this beast.
It's huge.
It's massive. Standard collision warning and emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, and active lane management.
Which is, by the way, all the same things that are inside that Pacifica we recently drove. And those systems are becoming more and more pronounced throughout every lineup of every automaker pretty much out there. However, by putting that in this vehicle and making safety a little bit more of a priority, I think that that's a good thing for Jeep because that's something that they desperately need. They need to be known more as the safety company.
Let's talk about some of the cool new tech that's brand new on Grand Cherokee. Rear seat monitoring camera. So it's a little camera system inside the vehicle that lets you see what's going on in the far back rows.
Once again, similar to what we had inside the Pacifica.
That's right, that had that as well. I forgot about that.
It ticked off my teenager so much when she was in the back. She was texting. We were parked. We were looking at holiday lights, right? And so I decided to activate the system. And I could clearly see what she was putting into her phone, and she was talking to a friend of hers, and she was texting her friend and probably complaining, but I could clearly see her fingers hitting the screen, and I could see the name of the friend that she was talking to, and I said, so what are you saying to Karen? And my daughter freaked, and she was mad. She said, shut that system off, no! And you know what? I totally get why this system would work for some family members who are paranoid about their kids. In my case, I just used it to annoy mine. But the thing is about this system, if you're driving, you can activate it. It will work while you're rolling. Really bad idea to do if you're the driver. Have the passenger do it or don't do it at all, because it takes your eyes completely off the road.
Do you think it's useful? Do you like having that system?
I would if I was a first-time parent and everything is, oh my God, my kid might die of a disease if they're staring in the wrong direction or whatever. So if you're really freaking out about that, this helps kind of alleviate some of that. On the other side of it, if you care less and you're on your second or third kid, you're like, whatever, man, just rub dirt on it, then the system is useless. You don't need it. So there's kind of that balance between the two of them. I would imagine, Tommy, if you were a toddler again, going back 10 years, that you would probably, your parents would, I know your dad, he'd be looking at it and just like, Tommy, get your hands out of your mouth, that type of thing.
Yep.
Because it's there to use, and your dad's the type of guy that's like, oh, there's tech, I'm going to use it.
Yeah, oh, for sure, yeah, absolutely. And he still has to tell me to stop sucking my thumb, so that's be a useful feature even today. Now, if you look at this is an interesting thing as well. So in the kind of the brochure images that you've used here, you can see they've got a little dog in the third row area, and they're using it to monitor the dog. Something I've noticed here too, and I have to do some more investigating into this because this is kind of bizarre. Look how the third row seats fold down. So the backrests fold down, but it looks like the seat cushion folds up against the walls of the storage bay.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
That's
but that
weird.
That's what it looks like. For those of you who are listening, what he's basically saying is like old school vehicles would fold kind of like that, where they would push over.
I'm wrong. No, I think
he's wrong.
I think what's going on here is that this model just has the tan armrests for the third row.
Oh,
I was gonna say that would be a weird thing. Yeah. Okay. False alarm averted because there's tie downs in there. I apologize for the confusion.
Okay. No, that's. I'm glad because I can't see the screen that you're looking at right now.
So other new tech, and I will be curious to hear your impression on this because I've never used one of these successfully. There is a 10-inch, there's a digital rear view mirror as a package option on all but the base model. So basically what that is, in the center of the vehicle, you've got the rearview mirror. You can flick a switch and it turns into a camera. The idea being you can still see out the back when there's stuff in the trunk. My issue with it is my eyes just don't adjust. So I'm looking into the real world as I drive along, I glance up the rearview mirror, it's this digital thing and it just like throws me off. What do you think of them?
GM was one of the first companies to really establish it. In fact, the first time I saw it was in a Cadillac, and I hated it at first. But since then, in other GM products and now some other products that are out there, I really think it's brilliant. One of the cool things that these LCD screens do is if you have passengers in the car, you no longer have to worry about their heads blocking your rear view. And in terms of the camera angle, it's pretty close to what you're looking at in the rear of your vehicle. Also, nowadays, a lot of vehicles have very small rear glass that's kind of hard to look out of. This eliminates that whole issue and gives you a much clearer view of what's behind you. So that's the positive. But the negatives, Tommy's right. It takes a little time, and in some cases, some people never quite adjust to looking at that mirror or that image. Now, the good thing is you're able to flip between them. So you can actually use your regular mirror and then hit a switch, and then boom, you have your image. And for those people who just don't like looking at the digital image, they don't have to use it, which is a positive. Also at night, some people really like the clarity of the digital image and some people can't stand it. So it really is, something that depends on who you are in terms of your eyes.
Yeah, so it's going to be one of those things that you absolutely love or just never use. So other new tech, active driving assist, so that's a hands-on wheel, hands-on road driver assistance program. But basically, in theory, you can kind of just drive along with your hands on the wheel, looking at the windshield, ready to take control, but the car will do the steering and the stopping and the going.
Right,
At least on the highway.
And don't pull one of those stunts where you tape a can to it.
No, I hate that.
Yeah, but that type of system, other vehicles are using it, and this is like a third generation of that. And I'm assuming it's going to be a fairly good system. And with a vehicle this long, especially for those people who aren't used to driving a big, truck or SUV, I think it'll be really helpful for those who are doing long road trips.
There's also apparently a hands-free version coming later in 2021 for the higher end Overland and Summit model. So think something like Cadillac Super Cruise.
Kind of like that.
Where you go on a highway, you set it and you forget it, and then it is proper hands-off. You can kind of just watch the road, be ready to take control, but not touch any of the controls. So that's going to be a weird thing we'll have to try out. The next piece of tech, which is new for Grand Cherokee, which I've never used successfully, but maybe Nathan has some insight. the night vision camera, which uses infrared, searches for heat signatures from people and animals up to 650 feet away.
Okay, so the best thing I was ever able to do, and this is another one that GM was early in the game with, and I believe it was a Cadillac. I was at a campsite, and I was able to carefully, monitor the fact that somebody was in a tent and they were changing, because I'm serious. I didn't realize I was doing it until I flipped on the system. It's like, oh, this is kind of like X-ray vision. So I guess if you're a pervert at a campsite, it works great.
Oh, God.
I know. Sorry, Tommy. It blew his mind. But no, in all honesty, the system itself, I think, would be useful if you were on a very small road or a dirt road at night and you were worried about animals running out in front of you, because you'd actually be able to see at a distance their heat signature, or perhaps a runner who was stupid enough not to wear reflective gear at night in a dark area. Otherwise, it's a gimmick and it's not that useful. Those two scenarios, and maybe once again the campsite thing, those are really the whole. I'm sorry, guys, I can't help it. Those are really the two main issues that might work out for you if you like that system.
So why did you have the night vision system on at the campsite in the first place?
Well, I was bored, and I was waiting for the person I was with to bring in their material into the vehicle so we could leave. And it was nighttime, and I think we were going to go out to dinner, and we had a campsite already set up. And so there I was, and I was just kind of playing with the system. And I noticed that it's like, what's this person doing there? Are they dancing? Oh, that's a tent. Oh, wait a minute. And I couldn't see details, guys, but I could tell what that person was doing. The point is that the system itself is active, but it's not like you're a soldier in the field able to go after, the bad guys. It's not that effective. It's decent for long range being, say, about 150 to 200 feet in front of you. If something's coming into the road, that's my guess. I haven't actually used it for that, just as a indirect peeping Tom, I suppose. But the whole thing is, it makes sense if that's the situation you're in. If you're on like an abandoned road, you know what I mean? Like some sort of area where there's not a lot of light, and maybe something's going to run out in front of you, then it makes a little bit of sense.
All right. Apparently, it's up to 200 meters, which is pretty nuts.
200 meters? That's a lot further than I thought.
Yeah, I don't understand how that's going to incorporate into the IP, but we'll have to get our hands on it and try it. So the other piece of tech that the Grand Cherokee incorporates, which I think is pretty cool, I'm not sure I've seen all that often, is intersection collision assist. So sensors watch cross-traffic situations and brake when necessary. It also uses sensors to tell if the driver is falling asleep. Now, the sleep thing I've seen all over the place.
I've seen it before, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying. But the intersection thing, that's kind of an interesting idea.
So I believe the way this system works is it's actually has it's redundant. So there's a couple things that kind of work with each other. So it has a wide field of view. So it can actually see vehicles at a distance, moving objects that are coming in, and that's one thing that it does. And rumor has it that other organizations out there, such as Ford, are actually talking about systems that actually talk to each other in the future. Where
Interesting.
Where it'll feed in. I don't think the system works that way, but it will. It uses a couple different algorithms that all feed into each other in order to tell you, hey, there's something coming at you or there's something coming near you, and it works accordingly.
So let's talk about pricing and availability. So the 2021 Grand Cherokee L will hit dealers in the second quarter of 2021. And I do believe that it is a 2021 model year vehicle.
It is, and that's what's so confusing, because they're still building a 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee WK2.
Right.
And that's why I think a lot of people are going to be confused. So they decided not to call it a 2022 model, they're calling it a 2021. So just keep that in mind, and that is going to cause some confusion at dealerships.
You know what is just alarming to me, though, is we're recording this on the 6th of January 2021, and this thing is supposed to hit dealers second quarter of 2021. That is coming up so quickly. I mean, it's amazing that they waited this long to reveal the vehicle. I mean, typically it's one of those things where they like reveal it 6 months to a year ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then like maybe 3 or 4 months before they actually hit dealers, there's like the media drive.
Yep.
But this thing is like, bam, it's out, bam, go buy one.
I have a theory about that.
What's your theory?
There are two things. One, COVID has screwed everything up.
Okay.
And so everything's been pushed back. I'm pretty sure that we would have been already on a drive like as much as a month or two in the past with this vehicle had COVID not been here. Second thing is and I joke about it, but I think it's very true. The new Stellantis group, the fact that there is PSA is now getting together with FCA, Peugeot. So they're coming together, and I think a lot of the components that make this type of big company come together, and it's going to be the 4th largest automaker in the world. Well, I think that what that's done is it's pushed a few things back because they've had to go over policy and what they're going to do with these products and how are they going to integrate it and everything else. So I think that between inner politics and COVID, that's why it's been pushed back.
It could be. I believe that this vehicle was designed and engineered entirely under FCA because that merger was announced not too long ago, and it takes a heck of a long time to kind of engineer and design the vehicle.
Oh, yeah. They've been working on this vehicle for years.
For sure, yeah. So we talked about the 4 trims, 2 engines at launch. No word on Trailhawk.
None.
The 2-row version will debut later this year to officially replace the WK2, apparently.
Yeah, but we don't have a date.
No, and that's probably, I'm thinking, when we'll see the Trailhawk, because the shorter one might have better angles, better...
It would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for off-roading,
Yeah.
I think you'd want the short one.
Yeah.
No Trackhawk announced either. The 4xe is also coming. That's the electrified one. That'll be announced later this year. No word on pricing, which is even more alarming that we're like a month or 2 out. Still don't know how much it'll cost.
Yeah, and not only that, but there's more. What about the 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo? What about the 3-liter V6 turbo diesel?
I forgot about the diesel.
Yeah, that diesel is working pretty well inside the Ram and has good torque numbers and is pretty damn efficient. So I know they're doing the 4xe, and the 4xe I'm assuming will be a very similar system that's available in the Wrangler because that's a front engine rear drive setup. So what, are they going to do a diesel maybe? I mean, that's a big question.
I mean, yeah, the WK platform has had diesels
Exactly.
forever now. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I totally forgot about the EcoDiesel. So competition-wise, the Grand Cherokee has historically competed with stuff like the kind of like the Ford Explorer, stuff kind of like the Chevrolet Traverse in some ways, maybe Toyota Highlander.
Yeah.
This, though, as you mentioned, is a chonker. This is a big vehicle. I mean, it's sized like Explorer, but also now like a Yukon, which is body on frame.
Or Tahoe, yeah.
Or Tahoe. I mean, it's approaching Expedition.
Yeah.
This is a big old vehicle.
Yeah. As I said before, the stats are, I mean, it is a couple inches smaller, but, you know, in terms of its pricing, we assume that it's going to be in the same ether as some of those vehicles we just talked about.
So what do you think it'll start at? What do you think this new L will start at?
I think, well, let's talk about, so the base price for both the Yukon, Tahoe, and Expedition is around $49,000. That's their base model.
It's pricey.
So I'm thinking that the base price for this, the V6, will undercut that just a little bit, around between $46,000 and $48,000. That's what I'm thinking their base price is going to come in at.
I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic because I'm hoping that they're still going after like Kia Telluride, Hyundai Palisade. So I'm going to say 42 starting, which is more than the current Grand Cherokee, which is like mid-30s, I want to say. It's pretty affordable.
Yeah, the current, but then again, they've dropped the price again and again as it's gotten older.
So I'm going to guess this new L model will start at 42, and I think the short one is going to start at 39. That's my prediction.
Okay, so between you and I, there's about a $4,000 to $5,000 difference in terms of guessing. So we'll see. There is a lot of demand for big 3-row SUVs in this class. It's the 3rd largest class out of everything out there when you go from pickup trucks to midsize SUVs and everything else that are out there. So there's going to be a pretty big demand, and people have wanted it. You know, the last time Jeep actually built a 3-row SUV was back during the Commander days.
Wow. Was it that long ago?
Yeah, remember that Commander?
Oh, yeah, I remember the Commander.
You know, it's kind of an unsung hero because it kind of filled a gap for a while, but it really was not a great... The interior packaging for the 3rd row was dreadful.
I think on the Commander you could get like the Top Dog Quadra-Drive 2 system with like the limited slip stuff.
Yeah.
And you could get the 5.7 Hemi in the Commander.
Yes, you could. And it predated the Pentastar, so it had the older, what a lot of people like to call the boat anchor, V6. I've taken them off-road. I actually was one of the earlier days of when I was starting to do journalism with vehicles. So I did go on the event. I did go off-road with it. It wasn't too bad, but there were a lot of things about it that they just really missed the target on. But it did give people a 3-row Jeep, and then they got rid of it. And they just, ever since then, they've never built one. So I was curious to how long it would take.
I like the look of the Commander, how it's like a perfect box, but I've heard the interiors are really crummy, like super plasticky.
It's super plasticky. You know what really drove me nuts about that? They had these fake Allen screws all over the dash.
Oh, really?
So they look like kind of like mechanical, like, oh yeah, look at that. And then when you touch them, you realize, oh wait, that's just a piece of plastic that's actually part of the plastic dash. So it's fake. And since then, Jeep has absolutely done a 180 with their interior designs. They're so much better now. But back then it was a rugged vehicle. People still drive them. They're out there on the road. They're actually decent tow vehicles too. If you tow 5,000 pounds, no problem.
They had the, I know they had the option for the 4.7 V8, which was similar to like the Dakota, which died eventually.
Yeah. They were around at the same time.
But the cool thing about the Commander was, it still had a lot of the off-road capability. So I think it was still a solid rear axle. I could be wrong about that.
No, you're absolutely right.
I could be wrong about that. But anyways, I'm excited to see what the Grand Cherokee will start out. I have a prediction. The Top Dog Summit and Overlands, I think we're going to be touching like 70 Gs.
Oh, easily. I think that will easily be in that, if not more. Because if you're looking at just what Chevy's doing with their Tahoe and Ford and everybody else, they're breaching the $80,000 mark easily.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's quite possible we could be all the way up there. And bear in mind, people like to pay for that extra tech, and they don't mind paying that extra price. I do. I think it's ridiculous. I think that having a vehicle like that in the $50,000 range is kind of pricey.
So yeah, for sure. So let's kind of do a little bit of wrap up and talk about where this fits in the history. So I think this is the 5th generation Grand Cherokee, started with ZJ, WJ, WK1, WK2, and now WL. Where do you think this fits into the Grand Cherokee lineup? I mean, is it too street oriented? Is it kind of what you were expecting?
No, it was a little bit more street than I was expecting. When I saw this, and especially with all the promo material, and I didn't really see anything doing real off-roading, I started getting nervous. Because one of the things that Jeep does is that they're fantastic at just taking the image of Jeep and saying, here's a mountain stream, and here's it going up and over a boulder, even though half the people who drive these things are never going to go off-road. Here's it going off-road, but there was not a single image of it doing any bashing.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, all the images you have in front of you, is there anything other than a dirt road?
No, I mean, this kind of riverbank is
that's
crazy
not enough
to
for me. I could do that in my Nissan Leaf.
You could do that in your Leaf.
Yes, so that to me is kind of like, they're trying to kind of prepare us for something that might not be very off-road worthy. The whole thing about being trail rated, which by the way hasn't been discussed, is something that I like. I like the fact that almost everything that Jeep builds now is or has a variant that is trail rated, which means that it can actually do some actual off-roading, to various levels. This one doesn't really strike me as that, and I'm a little concerned.
So this trim that you see right here is kind of interesting because it has the tow hooks, and this little round badge, it's hard to say, that may be a trail rated badge.
But they don't announce it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, the tow hooks, I know you're happy, Tommy, because tow hooks make Tommy happy.
You're happy, yep.
Yep. But, and that one does look like it's on its maximum height. It definitely looks like it has the air suspension compared to some of the other shots of other vehicles on the road. But the bottom line is, until I see it going up and over rocks and being bashed, I'm concerned that it might not be a real off-roader. So I'm hoping that they'll allay my fears. I hope that, I'm wrong. Yeah, that's kind of sort of an off-road picture, but it's really not. You know, I mean, come on, look at that picture. The picture he's showing right now, guys, if you're just listening, is it kind of in a desert environment, but it's not really going over any major obstacles. So that's my issue. I'm a little concerned about that. I hope I'm wrong.
I think they knocked the styling out of the park. I really know you think it's too long, but I think it's got
but it's real. I think it's a good-looking vehicle regardless.
Yeah, I think it feels much more premium than older Grand Cherokees. They feel like they've really tried to step it up a couple notches in terms of comfort and luxury. Now, the original Grand Cherokee, when it debuted, in the early 90s with, I think it was the mayor of Detroit driving up the stairs to Kobo convention. Remember they busted through the glass?
Yep.
It was this big spectacle. So that one originally was kind of supposed to be more comfortable and refined than the little Cherokee. The little XJ. Yeah, exactly. Much more comfortable than the Wrangler, but it was still super off-road worthy, so it had solid axles, and even though it was unibody, it could go anywhere. Then over the years, they've gotten more and more comfortable and luxurious, much more big.
And car-like.
Good point. I'm worried, I agree with you, I'm worried that they've gone a little bit too roady.
Yep.
I mean, this segment, when you've got Kia Telluride and Hyundai Palisade, those cars are so good. I mean,
They're really good. Both of those cars, both of them in different ways, have absolutely knocked it out of the park, and I think that they are now the new, challenger.
Right.
The other side of it is whether or not Jeep can take them on and somehow make it competitive price-wise, which I don't think they can do price-wise.
Well, that's what I liked about the Grand Cherokees. It's always had that kind of rugged nature.
Yeah.
This one feels like they've gone way kind of on-roady.
Exactly.
And that's a hard segment to beat in when you're going against some of the Koreans now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a little bit worried about that. But apart from that, wish we had some new engines. I know Nathan likes the current engines, but they're just
No,
old.
I want the diesel is what I want. Yeah, because you got maximum torque and really good range. Hey, that 4xe might be astonishing.
It could be really fast.
It could be a stonking good platform. And the idea of being able to plug in, look, I'm coming over to the EV side, so I see the benefits there. So this could be a nice little mix, but we don't know yet. They haven't announced any numbers. But for what they have, I'm not surprised that they're sticking with the Pentastar. I'm not surprised that they're sticking with the 5.7. Remember, they got to kind of keep something, that helps lower the price. So these are mass-produced engines. By the way, both of those engines are built in Mexico.
And the interior it looks to be
Just fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't felt it, but it looks best in class or top notch.
Yeah, it's just beautiful.
It's really good. And it's interesting to see them go so upscale. It's a weird concept in my head to think that, someday not too long ago, Jeep could be competitors to like Lexus and Mercedes and BMW in terms of cross-shoppings like the Overlands with an X7 or like a Lexus GX, but it's coming.
No, it's already here to a certain degree. FCA, I would go back about 7 years ago. FCA started going throughout their entire lineup and building better and better interiors. I actually met one of the head of the interiors, Klaus, that really tall German guy. You met him.
Yeah, the really tall guy, yep.
Yeah, he's great, but he's moved on a little bit. He's still there, but in a different capacity. Anyway, their interior design and ethic for the design and materials inside their vehicles is absolutely top-notch, and I'm willing to bet that this vehicle, this new one, this Jeep, will be competitive in terms of design, form, function, and comfort to anything that's being built by the Japanese or the Germans.
Ooh, bold statement.
Bold statement.
Well, we'll see if Nathan is correct, so be sure to stay tuned to where, Nathan?
TFL Talk, TFL Car, TFL Truck, TFL Off-Road, TFL Now, TFL Bike, TFL Classics.
That's it.
Stop.
You're done.
We're done.
You got him.
I still am trying to get them all together.
All right, well, stay tuned to TFLcar.com if you want a more concise place.
Yeah.
And as always, thank you for listening to the TFL Talk podcast.
See you guys.